You good?
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if it was actually you.
Who else would I be?
Well, you're wearing what Q&A Josh was wearing last episode.
Who?
Q&A Josh.
What are you talking about?
You know the whole bit from last time?
What's a bit? Hey, Alex.
Jesus Christ. Why is Q&A Josh out again?
Oh, sorry. I gave him that conversational update, but now he just asks responsive questions. I'll put him away. I'll be right back.
You know we don't even do Q&As that often.
So, we're doing an episode on something other than Star Trek, of whatever this is, and it's Firefly, which is kind of like Star Trek.
But different.
Yeah, this show was recommended to us by a lot of our audience, and we ended up watching it. And, you know, I got to be honest. Okay, first I'll just say, to pre-qualify, love this show. I'm sure you would agree. But going into this pilot episode, it was rough. It's a 90-minute pilot, and it's not like it's a 90-minute movie where you get a full story. You get a pilot setting up a bunch of stuff for 90 minutes. And then the earlier episodes of the show were probably the weaker ones. So for the first, 2 months watching this show, I liked it, but I did not feel how I feel now, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, those first few episodes, I remember watching Shindig, I'm like, what are we doing, man? What's going on? It's like, I was kind of getting it, but I wasn't. That episode, I really was not feeling it at all. Did not like it at all. But as we went on, it's like one of those things where it just kept getting better. It's weird. Every episode got better, and every episode I'm like, oh my God, oh my God.
Yeah, and it hit a point where it was like every episode was like some of the best episodes of television I've seen. And then it really finished strong. Today we're going to be talking about our top 5 favorites of the 14 episodes.
Yeah, it wouldn't be fitting to do a top 10.
And then we'll also be just discussing the show as a whole. And then on Patreon, we'll be talking more detailed thoughts on Serenity, the follow-up movie that we reacted to here on the channel. We already talked in length after, in that reaction, but we'll go into detail even more now that we've had some time to think about it over on Patreon. But yeah, I think that the first thing that has to be said about this show, I didn't know any of the actors except Nathan Fillion going into it. And of course, Nathan Fillion is great as Malcolm. But everyone steps up in this show and, does their part. This is, I think, the best ensemble cast of the show I've ever seen. Like, no one is weak. Even the Doctor and River, who I've given a lot of shit over the course of the show, they end up, I was thinking about the other day, I was like, this show wouldn't be the same without Simon and River. You know what I mean? And not even just the same, it would be worse. So, yeah, every character in the show was awesome.
I totally agree. Yeah, everyone has their place. Everyone contributes. Most of the episodes, everyone ties into the plot and helps solve and has a place. I mean, there's some episodes where someone's missing, but everyone is so super fleshed out and realistic. They feel like real people, and there's characters that have their comedic moments, but also have their serious moments. It's super weird. Everyone it's perfect. It's so hard to explain. There's some shows where someone doesn't fit, or two people are alike, but everyone is so unique. And everyone is fascinating, and we in our reactions, we're when someone's missing, we're like, "Hey, we miss them." It's where are they? We haven't seen them for 20 minutes, and I think that just shows how good the writing is.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's also address Joss. When we started the show, we were making fun of Joss, and to this day, I'll make fun of Joss. But that doesn't mean that we don't like the work, or we have to disqualify everything that he's ever made because of our feelings about him, obviously. But I do think you got to give him credit. The writing on this show, I think he wrote it all by himself, or at the very least, he's the head writer of the entire show. And it's just an excellently told story, and it sucks it had to get cut off so soon, but I'm excited to jump into the graphic novels and the books and everything. But yeah, the writing is some of the strongest. We won't get into individual episodes just yet, but some of the conversations Malcolm has with Jane or Anara or whoever it is, it so quickly hooks you in emotionally. It's somehow able to get you immediately care about these characters, even though the show has a weaker beginning. I had already cared about the characters.
Everything's super quick for the most part. I mean, it's 43 minutes, 44 minutes an episode. And it's yeah, you got to be locked in the entire time. I mean, people have given us flack. Oh, you missed this line. And no, we saw the line. I saw it on the subtitles. I just didn't have a big reaction to it. But it's trying to remember everything that happened. Because every video is oh, if you notice this said that, teases this. I'm just ugh.
Yeah. Definitely a show that lends itself, I think, to rewatches, and I'm super excited to dive into a rewatch of it. And there's not a lot of it, so you can rewatch it pretty quick. All right, so we'll jump into our top 5, but first let's do one honorable mention. So kind of like a top 6, but honorable mention for me is going to have to be Ariel. It didn't make it into my top 5 because the episode as a whole, while I think it's probably the best Simon episode, when they go to the hospital, they do this heist, Simon gets to school the one younger doctor and everything. Simon's not my favorite character, so the episode itself is just fine, but that ending, man, I thought Jane was dead.
Money was too good.
I got stupid.
I'm sorry, okay? Be reasonable.
I thought Malcolm was going to let Jane get sucked out of the plane and die, and for it to convince me of that, when, like, of course you're watching a show, you don't think they're going to kill off the main character, like that, but for it to convince me in that last moment.
Make something up. Don't tell him what I did.
Wow, no, he is dead. And then that's when Malcolm hits the button and lets him survive. So that ending on its own, it didn't make my list, but that ending had to make it my honorable mention.
Yeah, I love that episode because we finally get to see Simon, like, he's always being pushed around and bullied and all that, and he finally gets to be the man in a situation.
Now, I'm not going to move from this spot until one of two things happens. You answer my very simple question, or you shoot me.
And also that ending, same thing, love that moment. That was also my honorable mention, so I'm going to say my second honorable mention, which is War Veterans, the episode where Mal and Wash are being tortured, and then, like, Zoe chooses Wash.
Now
Him. I'm sorry. You're going to ask me to choose, right?
Wash being jealous of Mal, it's like, whatever. But the stuff later on, like the torture scenes, like Mal trying to purposely make Wash mad.
I'm gonna take your wife into my bed. I'm gonna get me a piece of that.
Fun episode, so that'll be my honorable mention.
All right, and lastly on Ariel, I just wanted to say, too, didn't make my list because I think it's the only episode where a character is just straight up not in it at all, which is Shepard. Just isn't in in that episode. He's not, like, written off or anything. He's just gone.
Automatically lowered because he's not in it.
Yeah. And I also do want to address, too, I love that over the course of the show, it basically became a meme how many different names we gave Shepard. Like, we'd call him Preacher Shepard, Pastor, Priest, Father.
Book.
You called him Bishop in the movie reaction a few times. People were like, who's Bishop?
He has so many names.
Yeah. So I just love that. It's kind of like our own meme throughout the whole show. We just like call him different stuff every episode.
Because he's had so many nicknames, I assumed Bishop was one of them.
Okay.
Fuck.
My number 5, the man they call Jane. Janestown.
He robbed from the rich and he gave to the poor. Stood up to the man and he gave him what for.
Yes.
Great episode.
Fantastic.
Awesome song. I've listened to it since watching the episode on my phone.
It's on that workout playlist.
Yeah. And also, again, the ending. One of the strongest endings. I mean, we'll talk about the episode itself, but the ending.
Ain't about you, Jane. It's about what they need.
Love those sour note endings. It's weird.
Yeah.
I don't like those happy endings, but it's like, yeah, it's not about you, man. It's about them and what they need. It's like, who cares about you? It's about these people need hope. These people need something to keep them going, and you gave them that, whether you meant to or not.
Yeah, and there was a lot of other stuff to do that I loved about this episode. The world building. You get to see the Mutters, just like this colony of people who, like, it was just like a hut, but then when you go underground, it's like a full bar and everything was cool. Yeah. And this whole society of basically poor working people who are having all their money taken, very similar to America.
Also, that one prisoner that was just kept in this box all those years.
Yeah, and he looks disgusting.
And he finally gets out and dies.
Yeah.
Just perfect for the show.
And then you also have the side storyline in that where Nara gets the client, who is actually the evil person of the town, his son.
Yes. Tying everything together.
Yeah, tying everything together, because then she has sex with him and then tells him, look, becoming a man isn't about having sex, it's about, like, making choices. And he releases, the serenity.
Makes the choice to release the ship.
Yeah.
Yep, wonderful.
So great side stories in that. I love how the whole episode kind of subverted my expectations.
No one's going to remember you.
I think it's possible they might.
What's your number 5?
My number 5 is Objects in Space.
You know that's not yelling at her. That's really
Sweetheart, you want nothing to do with that.
Which was written and directed by Joss. There's some other writers in some of these episodes, but this one was both written and directed by him. I'm sure Joss Whedon was like the supervising writer for all of it. Like gave everyone like, I'm sure like maybe the other writers were allowed to write some dialogue. But I loved this episode. The guest star of the week, the bounty hunter, was one of the most fascinating and terrifying characters I've seen in a long time. I've said it in the reaction. It's Joss Whedon's Thanos if he did Infinity War. Like he literally put every horrible thought that Joss Whedon's ever had into this guy.
You ought to be shot, or stabbed, lose a leg, be a surgeon, you know?
Dropped some like lore questioning moments. It's like, that's not a shepherd talking about Book. And I'm just like, what do you mean it's not a shepherd? And I wanted so much more, but knowing that was, that was the last episode, it's like, oh, some fantastic stuff in there. And the nice little twist. Because knowing River's condition, like I almost believe that she did absorb into the ship.
Yeah, I believe that too.
I'm not on the ship. I'm in the ship. I am the ship.
Because like also the intro, we see what everyone's thinking about her. That intro was super interesting.
I would be there right now.
Good stuff. And the twist how she snuck into his ship. And that guy just floating in space at the end.
Yeah, Juba Early, yeah, he was great. And I love how he just pegs everyone on the ship immediately. Like,
I'm not gonna waste my time threatening you, because I think you believe I will kill people if someone upsets my plan.
oh, it's just so good, you know? It's like, he doesn't have to do it, you know?
But also, favorite moment is when Jane's laying in bed and hears the ruckus. Rips down the curtain, you see all the guns, but it was really just his blanket, and he just turns over and stays asleep. It's like, oh, it was amazing.
People don't appreciate the substance of things, objects in space.
My number 4 is our Mrs. Reynolds.
Who are you?
Mr. Reynolds, sir. I'm your wife.
This was the episode for me. Again, I'm not going to sit here and say I hated the first 5 episodes or anything, but like, at this point, after the first 5 episodes, I was like, oh, this show is just good. Like, it's just fine. I'm excited to watch the rest of it, whatever. Then our Mrs. Reynolds came along, and I was like, holy shit. Like, it was an excellent episode. Christina Hendricks, just so great. Just, man, it sucks she's not in this more. Just her performance in both of the episodes she's in, but in this one, being, like, completely different in the first half. You buy in that she's just this vulnerable person from this poor world where they get married off, and then that switch in the middle where she knocks out Mal and then is immediately a different person.
Son of
Night, sweetie.
Excellent. And then even just a little small scene with her and Inara where she meets her in the hallway and she like tries to seduce her, but Inara's like not buying into it. Just great stuff all around there. And it really surprised me when we watched it, and it was like, wow, okay, I guess this show's kicking it up to the next level, and it did after this.
Yeah, her layers of performance. It's like when you see her as innocent, then you see her evil, then we get to see her as evil, acting innocent, with us knowing that she's evil. Like, just, like, top-notch performance. Like, I think it's the best performance of the whole show, in my
Which
opinion.
is so funny, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, which is why I was, like, so excited to see her in her second episode. I often go back and rewatch that reaction because I literally had an audible gasp. Just
Now, I want you to meet my Bridget.
Oh, no way. Mal, even though he gets, played for the fool basically in this episode, great character building for him because the whole time you can see his restraint of like, they talk about it all the time in the show, like these characters don't have sex. Like they're all on this ship, none of them are having sex with each other except for Zoe and Wash. So it's like no one else gets any action. He literally has this woman, not only like is his wife, but like willing to be that, we think, in the first half, like willing to be his wife and trying to seduce him. And he's like trying to stay strong so bad for, whatever reason you think that is, whether it's because of Inara or because of whatever, and his restraint to the point where she literally has to strip naked in front of him and like strongly seduce him just to kiss her, and he's like, oh, I'm going to the special hell. And then Shepard too, before Saffron takes the turn, Shepard thinking she's this vulnerable girl, also confronting Mal and being like, you better not take advantage of her.
The special hell.
Excellent moment with him. Yeah, love that episode.
Fantastic. Speaking of Saffron, my number 4 is Trash.
Tell me more about this job of yours.
Director is Vern Gillum. He directed 4 episodes of Law and Order. Writers Ben Edlund and Jose Molina. I think Jose wrote 2 episodes of Agent Carter and 3 episodes of The Clone Wars. I already talked about my audible gasp at Saffron's return. This is one of the best returns ever. Like, I loved it so much. Her performance, great as always. The intro was my favorite. We get to see Mal naked for some reason.
Yeah. That went well.
And our thoughts and expectations when we see him in the beginning, and in the end, why he's naked. It's like at the beginning, we think like, oh, he's really down and out. But at the end, we figure like, no, he's actually on the up and up. It's like, ah. And just the layers of boom, boom, boom of like, oh, who's ahead of who.
Mm-hmm.
And Inara having that, like, oh, petty thief. You know, like, oh, he's do something on this ship. And at the end, she actually helps him. And like she's like the central part of them beating Saffron.
Where is it? Ah, it's not here! Looking for this?
All that shit was fantastic.
Yeah, this Trash and Ariel are both kind of like heist-centered episodes, but I think that Trash does it so much better in that respect because, you know, they have this plan where everyone is involved, everyone has their own part. Some of them succeed, some of them don't, but everyone gets to play along, and I really love to see that. And the fact that she gets to be unhinged the whole time.
Oh, you are a tweaked one, you are.
But face it, hubby, I'm really hot.
It's like she just fully buys in, you know, to this character. So yeah, I really like that too.
You call this going well?
We got the loot, didn't we?
Yes,
Then
but
I call it a win.
Number 3, Heart of Gold.
Folks asking for help from us petty crooks.
Well, it's for her.
Huh?
Now this episode, I was shocked because a lot of the comments people were saying this was their least favorite episode or one of their least favorites. I loved this episode. They go to the whorehouse and he meets Nandy, who really likes Malcolm, and that whole storyline where he sleeps with her and Inara, and Nandy ends up dying. That whole sequence at the end, this was coming off of The Message where we had loved all the episodes, and then The Message was still good, but it kind of had faulted, and we're like, oh, maybe, you know, the good run is over, and then this was right after. I'm like, no, it's back to being amazing. I loved the character of Nandy, loved the way they portrayed that. Great moment with Jane when they're on the ship.
Don't know these folks, don't much care to.
They're whores.
I'm in.
Great moment there. And also, I thought about this since seeing the episode. You know, at first I was like, yeah, of course Inara's upset because Malcolm had sex with Nandy, and that's her friend. But I think it's actually more layered because when Inara first finds out and she lies to Malcolm and she's like, she's well worth taking advantage of, I hope he did. I hadn't thought about the fact that this is a whorehouse and Jane is also sleeping with them, and they make comments where like, Nandy's like, I'm surprised more of you aren't taking advantage. But the reason Inara was so upset wasn't just that Malcolm slept with a whore. Like, if he would have slept with someone else, she probably still would have been pissed at him. But it was the fact that it was Nandy who genuinely liked Malcolm. And Inara probably knew that from seeing them interact. So to Inara, it wasn't just that they had sex. Because remember when we were reacting, I'm like, why does she have the right to be mad at him when that's what she does for her job? But it's because she thought they had a genuine connection as well.
That's what she's mad about.
Yeah, and at least that's my interpretation.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And so then that made me love the episode even more after I thought about it. Flaws, of course, the villain is goofy and over the top and ridiculous, but it made his death so satisfying when that happens at the end.
Say goodbye to your daddy, Jonah.
So yeah, I really love that one.
Yeah, and also, I just wish we had more seasons. The end where like we thought we were gonna get this whole arc where she leaves because it's like, oh, they're gonna get together, and then like,
I'm leaving.
Oh no.
Yeah, this has 2 moments where there's the gut punch, and then there's also Zoe kind of hinting to Wash that she wants to have a kid, both of which don't hit as hard because watching it, you know there's 1 episode left. So it's like neither of these stories are going anywhere. But...
Yeah, and especially after Serenity.
Yeah.
Were I unwed, I would take you in a manly fashion.
Because I'm pretty?
Because you're pretty.
My number 3, Out of Gas.
Got a name all picked out.
Love Out of Gas. Director David Solomon. He directed an episode of Star Trek Discovery, a few episodes of Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Writer was Tim Minier. He wrote 20 episodes of The X-Files. This has one of my favorite plot devices in any episode of television ever, where we start off Mal's like dying, and we get like 2 different forms of flashbacks with each with their own set of color grading. Like we get to see how we discovered Kaylee, how we met Jane, and like also flashback to like what are the events of happening, like what are the consequences of the events that Mal's going with. Yeah, I love it.
I will go right to my number 2 because my number 2 is Out of Gas.
Yay!
In a perfect world, think this could have been a functional pilot, but I do think that there are positives to it being later on in the season because now you know all these characters already and then you get to see their backstory. I usually hate, one of my things I hate the most is when a show has a story going on and then an episode goes, okay, we're not going to progress a story because now let's take you back and you get to learn all the things about the characters. Now, next episode, go back. I just hate that because so many times it ruins the momentum of the show. But in this, it didn't at all. It worked great because they had such a good current time story with being out of gas and the ship dying and Malcolm almost convincingly dying that the flashbacks supplemented it. Like it wasn't just this flashback episode. It had so many more layers, as you said. So that is why it is close to my number 1 episode. I think it really just summarizes the whole show. Like you could just watch this without seeing the rest and kind of get what the show is about. Almost everyone's origin surprised me too. Kaylee, like having sex with their current mechanic and then taking his job, that's awesome. Jane, working against them, literally capturing Malcolm and Zoe. And
You're making how much?
Yeah.
Oh, it's pretty low, huh? He's like, huh?
And he's like, I'll get my own room. That was great.
And it could have fallen into a pigeonhole because, like, in my mind, I'm like, oh, Kaylee's boyfriend is going to be the villain, which is why the ship's dying. I'm like, no, they didn't do that. They didn't fall into that. It could have been an easy villain. It's like, oh, he was set up in the beginning. It's like, no. So I respect them for not doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there also was no villain. Like it was just like a ship broke down and they had to deal with it.
Yeah, it's like I've been telling you to get this part. I told you.
Yeah, and then the fact that Zoe was knocked out, and then they left in the shuttles, and it was Zoe was like, "No, what are you doing? We're going back for Malcolm."
I call you back? No, Mally, you didn't.
I take full responsibility, Cap.
So I love that little piece too.
Gotcha. I might have confused that with another episode, but yeah, good stuff. Good stuff.
Hey, son. You hear a word I've been saying?
My number 2, Janestown.
Jane.
We gotta go to the crappy town where I'm a hero.
Director Rita Grabiak directed some episodes of Buffy, Vampire Slayer, an episode of Lost, and some like 911 shows that are really popular now. The writer was Ben Edlund, who was like writer of the Tick show, both old and new. Apparently there's 2 different ones, and an episode of the Clone Wars. Got to bring that up. I love this episode so much. We already discussed a little bit, but I love the idea of this horrible character like Jane. Like he's not a horrible character, but his character is just an awful person. And he's like recognized on this rinky-dink little planet as a hero because he accidentally dropped loot that he stole. And like it was not for these people at all. And he's like so against it in the beginning. It's like, oh no, he's hiding. Like, oh my God. It's like, and then once he finds out that they love him, he like becomes like the life of the party. Oh, and that ending, one of my favorite scenes in the whole show. We already discussed it, but some really good. Any episode that ends on like such a sour note, or it's like so good. I don't get it.
Because it's emotional,
Yeah,
like it makes you feel something.
And it's different because so many times, maybe because we're so used to Star Trek, of them laughing on the bridge.
Yeah.
But when an episode, especially like City on the Edge of Forever, ends with "Let's get the hell out of here," it's like whoa.
Yeah, 100% agree. Love that episode. Absolutely. All right, my number 1. My favorite episode, I'm not describing it, it's the title, Trash.
I won't make trouble. You can stick me in one of those crates if you like. Just don't leave me here.
Yeah.
I love our Mrs. Reynolds, but I think Trash is even better. And I've already talked about it a little bit, but Saffron is in full form here. She gets to spend the whole episode being unhinged and crazy. Every time you meet a new character, it's someone she manipulated before. You mentioned her husband, the guy at the beginning, just everyone. And it's like, how many husbands did you have? You find out she's been doing this for a long time. It wasn't just Malcolm. And so much of it, like, is just so fun to see Malcolm and her as almost like this buddy cop type thing, but you know they're going to cross each other at any point, especially Saffron. You get to learn all her other names, Yolanda, Bridget, I think, something like that. She has like a whole bunch of different names. She's like crying, and you believe her then too. You're like, oh, she's actually breaking down and sad. Nope, it's to get his gun. And you actually see in the show, I noticed while editing, when he comes and sits down next to her, you can actually see her reach around and grab his gun if you know what, if you're paying attention.
Wow.
All great stuff there, but my favorite moment isn't necessarily Saffron, even though she makes the episode, but my favorite moment, Anara coming in at the end.
Then I fly off, wait for you to double-cross Mal, beat you to the rendezvous spot, and grab the loot before you can get to it. What? You didn't see it coming?
Because I fully believe the argument she had with Malcolm at the beginning of the episode where she's like,
So you're in the gang now?
Well, since I can't seem to find work as companion, I might as well become a petty thief like you.
and then at the end when Saffron's looking for the thing and she's just there with the gun, I'm like, oh, I think that made Anara my favorite character. Like, that moment was so badass. And it was so awesome.
You're not gonna die, you big baby. Your 30s will be here in a few hours to dig you out.
All credit to Christina Hendricks, because my number one is our Mrs. Reynolds.
Everybody plays each other. That's all anybody ever does. We play parts.
I think I'm in love. I'd put Trash up there as well, but I don't know, just like the whole layered performance. And also the beginning of this episode was so fresh because everyone's happy, having a good time, not angry, yelling at each other. It's like we kind of get to see the crew like off duty for a bit. It's like oh, they're having fun. It's nice to see that for a second, and then like all the shit goes down. And like such a believable performance that she's like this poor woman that was accidentally married off.
We're not married.
I'm sorry that I shamed you.
You don't shame me.
Director Vondi Curtis Hall. He's more of an actor than a writer. He was recently in The Night House, and he was Ben Urich in Daredevil. He was like the guy working for the news station. Kingpin killed him in his office. Yeah, but the writer was Joss Whedon. Yeah, man. And also, this is one of those episodes that really helped like establish Mal as like a no bullshit gunslinger. Because he just like, I believe in this episode at the end, he just knocks out Saffron.
Yeah, knocks her out.
What's your real name?
I love this episode. I'd probably rewatch it any day, just for that performance and her like manipulating everyone in the crew. And so she tries to manipulate Wash, and then Wash starts talking about his wife or something. He's just like, it just knocks him out. It's like, okay, this isn't working.
Yeah, I think that the heart of the show is obviously Malcolm, and then Shepard I think is probably both of our favorite character. But Shepard's great, even though he's not heavily featured, and Nara's great, and Christina Hendricks just steals the show whenever she's there. So the rest of the crew is awesome, but they just don't get a ton of focus. But there's only 14 episodes. Like they would have had more. I mean, Simon and River get plenty of focus in the movie, which we'll talk about in the Patreon. Any closing thoughts? I think we had basically the same top 5, except what was the episode? Because you didn't have Heart of Gold. So what was the episode you had that I didn't? What was your top 5?
Objects in Space?
Yeah, Objects in Space, yeah. I liked it. It just didn't make my top 5, but yeah, really liked that one. Besides that, I think our lists were basically the same, just a little bit out of order.
Yeah.
But with so little episodes, I mean, you kind of expect that because there's the amazing episodes, and then there's just the good ones.
Yeah, like at first glance, I'm like, okay, this is whatever. I really like the grungy, dirty, like old Western type feel, but also like those weird futuristic types of technology and weird character things, like everyone speaking Mandarin because they could swear and not get flagged. Like I thought that whole thing was fascinating. This has been stuck in my head, but some weird attention to detail. Like they're in this spaceport, like basically Mos Eisley. They're talking to this dude. There's like some tarps, like some weird like curtains, and you see shadows of ships passing overhead. I'm like, oh, that's neat. I just love little stuff like that. And the show is really good. Like when they're on that sand, like everything looks so dark and dirty a lot of the times. But when they're on that sand planet or whatever, and everything's like super bright, it's like little things like that I like a lot. It feels like it should be commonplace, but like I don't know. Sometimes
shows aren't that good.
Yeah, everything looks flat a lot of times.
Yeah.
Everything looks flat, but everything there looks so real.
Yeah, and the direction too, and the camera work, like having this handheld style a lot of the time, but not getting like too overboard with it, but like having just like a nice visual style really helped the show. Everything felt, like you said, gritty and realistic, even though it's this like sci-fi outer space show. Yeah, they definitely they had something good here, and unfortunately, it was before its time. I think it's just the biggest flaw. It was just before its time. This show was made now, it would be successful.
You think so?
If it's the same people, I mean, it's impossible because they're older now. But like, if literally you just took this show and somehow transported it into the future, I'll at least say it had a much better chance of being successful. But I think at the time, with the way cable was and everything, it was just the wrong time for it.
Too smart for its time, too good for. I don't know. It sucks because the show is like a 9 on IMDb, like a 9 out of 10. It's like makes no sense. I don't know. Whatever.
But yeah, I'm really glad we watched it. Obviously, thank you to the people who recommended it, and we did already. It's on the channel by now. We did check out the first episode of Buffy, which is. Wasn't the strongest. We didn't come away like thinking it was awesome, but we also didn't like the pilot of this. I mean, the pilot might be my least favorite episode of this show. Not only because of the length, but because it's just like not that much happened that was super interesting. So, who knows as far as that goes, but we're definitely, we'll check out more stuff you guys recommend. And any closing thoughts on that?
No, I think that's it. I'm going to miss this show a lot. It sucks that it's over, but we didn't get the chance to see it turn into shit. So,
True.
You know what I mean? It's like so many things last forever or go on forever, and like those closing seasons leave a bitter note in people's mouths in some shows. But in this, it's just like this nice little time capsule where everything was great.
Yeah, and even with all the shit this show got put through, they got to make a movie. And it's like, that's so rare that you get a canceled show in the first season and you get to make a theatrical film a few years later. Regardless of how, you feel on the film, I think everyone would agree that it's better that they made the film than didn't make it. So, yeah.
Yeah, man, you got to get rid of Q&A Josh. He's creepy, he's unnecessary, and yeah, you got to get rid of him.
I mean, he was a little bit creepy at first, but I gave him that conversational update. He seems a little bit more natural now. I think he could work.
Yeah, it's more natural and it's scary. Well, how did he even afford this? They haven't even cloned like a human being. How do you have this thing?
I mean, I just put a lot of work into it. I spent a lot of hours. I don't want that all to go to waste.
You have another human being version of yourself that just reads comments. And how are you affording this?
Hey, don't worry about that, man. We have a Patreon.
I don't like it. He's creepy. He stares at the wall or he stares into your eyes and he asks the same question over and over again. This makes no sense. Why do you have this?
Fine. Okay. After you leave, I'll get rid of him. All right?